Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of content, creativity, culture, tech, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. He's one of those rare people that defies categorization. He has a PhD in evolutionary mathematics from Cambridge. He used to breakdance competitively in the UK. He spent time in finance, which he freely admits he's terrible at. And today he runs Global Street Art, the UK's largest mural painting organization, which has delivered over 3,000 murals for communities and brands across more than a dozen countries. He's also the founder of the London Mural Festival, which in its first edition also reached 1 billion people through earned media, not paid, earned. For advertisers, his work sits at the really fascinating intersection of art, culture, and outdoor media. Painted murals for brands like Gymshark, Fendi, Specsavers that people actually stop and photograph rather than just scroll past. We talk a lot about that on the show. And then he's recently named Leader of the Year at the Drums Out of Home Awards. He's spoken at Wired and TED about why paintings in public spaces matter. He's also built a museum of over 100,000 forgotten about ad artifacts, which is obviously super cool. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Lee Bofkin to the show.
Hello.
Lee, did I get any of that wrong?
Do you know what? That was really good. I can give you the background in my own words as well, but you really covered it, Adam. I mean, we are a media owner. Cynically or like reductively, our clients might think of us as like a property company with an art wrapper. We have 100 of our own exclusive sites for murals, more than across the UK, but we also have offices in France, Spain, and Belgium. We paint in 26 countries around the world, so we are Europe's leading hand-painted advertising company. That's true. But yeah, we've delivered not only hundreds of commercial projects every year for clients, and we've been going 15 years, but the 3,000 murals that you mentioned before, we also have a community side, and we've organized 3,000 pure art community murals. So we have this bridge between community and commercial. But the commercial is very centric around hand-painted advertising. That's the majority of the business. And we talk about that in standard media terms from a number of people that can see it, of course, but also from a dwell time, emotional resonance, memorability, and shareability point of view. And as any modern media owner would, we have stats to back up all of the claims. And that's really important for us. And then you started talking about our museum as well. And that's, for us, part of our market. It's not just a marketing strategy, but how clients started dealing with us changed over the years. So yes, the business is very much, from a revenue point of view, hand-painted advertising. And like most media owners, certainly in the earlier stages, our clients would use us as an execution partner. Valentina would give us the artwork, Marc Jacobs would give us the artwork, and they would say, go and paint this. And that's the majority of the work that still comes in. But increasingly over time, because everyone in advertising wants to do the different thing, hey, can you make my wall smell of strawberries for Absolute? Hey, can you put a real billboard on a wall upside down for Specsavers? So increasingly over time, people would use us as a feasibility partner. Go and do this becomes, can you do this? And then after time, you end up as a feasibility partner, you build up a toolkit of cool things that you can do that you've done on projects that other people may be less familiar with. So when Adidas came to us this year and last year for the Manchester Marathon, said, what would you do for us? At that point, we're firmly in the creative area, working as a creative partner, saying, well, look, we've got a real estate team. We'll find you a new wall on a running route. We'll paint the road for you because it'll look really good in the drone shots. But then we realize, in also being creative, because we are a media owner, we do not wish to compete against creative agencies. In fact, whoever we're working with, the brilliant media agencies, creative agencies, and brands that we sometimes work with direct, we need and want to be able to work with everyone in the creative industries without anyone feeling that we're their competition. So we said, how can we work with everyone so no one feels we're their competition? We said, let's make something up. We'll be the world's only inspiration partner. Because at least in theory, if you're inspiring, you help teams get more out of themselves. And for me, that addresses a question of, what can you speak with your clients about is essentially, let's go get a cup of coffee or a beer. Let's talk about work and the narrow product, or something that's more like education-based marketing. And so because we have an inspiration side to our activities, it allows us to talk in a completely authentic way with our clients or potential clients who aren't even in market and still add value. So I spend quite a lot of my time teaching creative thinking workshops. And I do that for lots of different agencies. I've done it to conferences where there's hundreds of people in the audience live. So that's really fun. But then we have our museum and our space where we host people as well. So all of that is true and more.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention leading creative workshops. I find that it's, at least in corporate America, companies say that they want creative people, and then they basically do everything possible to manage out any of the creative ideas or any of just the different ideas. And it's just, I feel like, at least over here, for a lot of companies, it's just such a risk averse culture. And creativity, what is creativity? It's risk. And I guess we can start there. What do you actually tell teams that they should do to start to be really creative and embrace risk? How do you get companies out of their shell?
Okay, cool. So you have to stand back and look at the value of creativity within an organization. And creativity within an advertising campaign is the biggest driver of ROI that marketers can control, because the thing that drives the most ROI is the size of your brand in the marketplace, your market share. The second most useful lever that a marketer has to pull is how creative your campaign is. And so we know that we need it, but we've set up organizational structures where we're reticent for change because creativity requires doing things differently. And actually that goes against our practices and our procedures, but we know if we don't change, we're going to ossify and do the same stuff. Now, it's a sad fact that for 50% of advertising campaigns, Adam Morgan did a study on this, working with different partners, 50% of TV advertising campaigns are less emotionally engaging than watching cows graze in a field. Now, boring advertising can work, but you just have to pay a lot more for people to pay attention. So if you've got something that's emotionally engaging and makes people laugh or like resonates in a certain way, you have a more effective, more memorable advertising campaign. And as marketers, we probably overestimate what we think the consumer can remember. We occupy a very small part of a consumer's thinking, right? And so just getting something that creates a little bit of an emotional tickle has tremendous value for an organization from a marketing point of view, at least from a priming point of view, right? So the value of creativity has been well established, and certainly the cost of not being creative has also been established as well. Now, then there's your question, Adam, of how do you make an organization more creative? The funny thing is, it's by doing the exercises that make you more creative. One of the reasons I realized that people bring me in to teach creative thinking, host creative thinking workshops, is because it helps people build their creative confidence and allows people the space to sort of speak up. But in a very fast-paced work environment, ideas could either be valuable because the idea is a good idea, or it could lead you to a good idea. But the faster we work and the less time we've got to consider and to have waking rest and to daydream and to bring in good creative ideas, the more we just work with an idea that's either ready-made and good or not, but we don't give ideas the oxygen enough to walk them around and become better ideas. We just don't take the time for it. So when I teach creative thinking workshops, I teach people to a technique, and there are many of these, to have a lot of ideas, right? It's not about, is the idea good, but have you got a lot of ideas? Because that's going to be a raw material for an idea progress. I find it really interesting when I give talks and I ask people who are working in the creative industries, how many of them were taught creative thinking in school? Very, very few, if anyone. Yeah, we did art, but were we taught creative thinking? And so I think there's this myth around creative thinking that it's just good idea or not good idea, and some people have it and some people don't. Great creative thinking that I've seen comes from having a number of ideas and then a process to refine those ideas, and you can consciously establish how people work together in groups to add to each other's ideas. You borrow an idea from improv comedy to say, I love that idea, here's what it makes me think of. Oh, that's really cool, I like this part of the idea, I want to expand on it that way. Instead of what you see in like fine art practice, what you see in architecture practice, they call it a crit or a criticism, where you see your great creative ideas just shot down. Well, that might make someone feel a little bit better than someone else, but it's not going to necessarily get you the best ideas. So really, it's about a collaborative process of how you shape those ideas together. And then at the end of the process, because creative thinking is either divergent, have a lot of ideas, or convergent, refine those ideas and direct it towards something. At the end of the process is when you do the convergent stuff. And you say, all right, now I'm going to put in place the constraints around the budget, constraints around the complexity, constraints around my time frame to deliver and execute. And then you shape your best ideas around that, but you've already had good ideas to start with and started to shape them. So I kind of teach a 4-stage process. And you know what? By the end of the process, people have had good ideas. And the fact that people have had good ideas, trying a sequence of methods to help them get there, there's a process to creative ideation. And that helps a lot of people. So, it's one of the most fun parts of my job today in running a media agency, but is the teaching our clients and our partners creative thinking.
So while we're on creativity, I was going to ask you a question about AI and creativity, but I think we have. I think you have to. I think we have to see the gallery first, and maybe do a quick tour. Tell us what it is. I'm going to put you on solo layout so we can see.
Cool.
But it'd be cool to get the overview.
Okay, great. Welcome. This is our gallery, right? So I've been a collector ever since I was a kid, and we built a space in our office where we noticed. A lot of offsites were in pretty boring spaces. And why would you want to go to somewhere boring if you're going to try and have some good creative ideas? You can do it, but if you set the tone of a space for creativity, it should be able to boost it because people feel better about being in that space. If you're signaling this is a space where I'm going to be creative, allowed to be creative, often you'll find people will be more creative. It's a really weird fact called identity priming. If someone self-identifies as an artist, they perform better on creative cognitive tasks than if they self-identify as an office worker. So if you invite people into a space that is clearly creative, people do perform well for their creativity. So this is our space, our gallery. Google popped in a couple of years ago or a year ago, and they scan the space. So you can go to Global Street Art on Google Maps, click see more images, and it drops you in this room. But it's basically a room that we use to host. I built my office in it as well. I got kicked out of the main office. But what you can also see behind me is in this section of the room, there is a real offline archive. And we've got 1,000 folders that you can see behind me, which is all original content. So if I pull out any of these immaculately organized folders, why don't I take, I'm going to take, here we go. This is a fun one. This is all the way from America. These are souvenir postcard folders. And it's like classic mid-century American design. Those kind of like beautiful like city names. But if I flip forward, you'll see this really fun postcard from Miami. When Fendi asked us, hey, we've got a wall in Miami, what would you do on it creatively? We said, well, we immediately thought of that postcard because it's Miami, right? It existed. And so we basically came up with this concept that the wall was going to be, the design of the mural was going to be a postcard to Rome, where Fendi's headquarters are, from Miami. And so we designed it based on that. And it was really fun. It was a popular campaign. Fendi actually produced the mural as a postcard and gave that away in store to encourage people to visit the mural. So it created this nice little bit of add-on. But the reason why we collect often so many small pieces of paper, sugar packets, matchbox labels, cinema tickets, small pieces of paper, for a few reasons. One of them is, if someone photographs one of our murals, Adam, and they share it on social media, and then someone is viewing it on a phone screen, it's basically the size of a matchbox label. And so if your mural doesn't work well or has more information than could be communicated on a matchbox label, it's probably got too much information to communicate really well as a mural that's photographed and then shared on social media. Does that make sense? So we basically, although we are designing and painting very large murals, when it's being shared on social media, it's brought down to such a small size that you should be conscious of the mural design, i.e. it should be scale aware, because it's going to be shared on social.
So Lee, let's go back. Your gallery is so cool, by the way. I definitely want an in-person tour at some point.
Great.
In terms of the other creative question that I want to ask you, because you're obviously a collector of human creativity, so I know you have opinions on this.
Sure.
However you want to take the AI question, how does AI change how advertisers and maybe artists more broadly shape creativity? Are you bullish or bearish? Are you technology is cool, we'll work with it? Or are you, with the people who have the pitchforks and say, hey, it's going to take our humanity?
Wow. Okay. Let's lead with the big questions.
That's right.
So look, I'm a proponent of AI. I do use it, of course. What you have to remember is I think 75% of the world hasn't tried AI. Most people that have tried working with ChatGPT or Claude or another tool have just done it once or twice. It's probably like 1% of people is at the level where they're kind of, a coding project or like building projects in Claude. There's an AI cognitive tax, right? And there's 2 or 3 challenges in working with AI. The first one is it's a really powerful tool, but you need to calibrate it properly. And because it's trained on quite verbose data, a lot of what AI gives you is produced very quickly. It's the first time in human history that we can think or write faster than we can think, because AI will give us outputs faster than we could have come up with it. And so it's quite easy to get flooded. But when you're building your projects in Claude, say, not only do you need to take the time to build the project, but you also have to refine the instructions so it gives you what you're actually looking for. What I've noticed in my use of AI is I don't want a colleague. I don't want AI to pretend to be human. I want it to jog me by recording and stimulating the right actions and activities for me to get on when I'm working with other people, predominantly. I've seen so many cases where this is a real challenge, where AI will produce a 4-page document where you only wanted a half-page document. And then it's very easy to forget what you wanted the document for in the first place. So you have to be really careful and think through what you want to get out of your AI tool as a partner, so that when it gives you a long output, you don't forget the things that you actually needed in the first place. And I've noticed, like, they say, it's been said that high performers perform better with AI because they'll be a bit faster and use is judicious, and they're critiquing the output. Because of cognitive offloading, low performers produce worse results and learn slower because of AI. So it's a tool, and how you get on with it depends on how you use it. I have a concern that with rapid, unjudicious overuse, it doesn't make us smarter. And I'm concerned that it can kind of flood us, and we're already bombarded by information. So I think the flaw of AI is partly us, almost. Like, it's so powerful as a tool that we have to be careful how we use and refine it before we get, because like, it's a Ferrari. But if you drive a Ferrari really quickly in the wrong direction, you're going to end up further away than if you walked in the right direction. So you get wherever you're going faster, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the right place. As a creative partner and a creative tool, I think it can be really powerful. But so long as you don't forget the you part of it, like, view it as a collaborator and not like a boss, frankly.
So I love that answer, by the way. And going with the race car analogy or the really fast car analogy, I've actually used a flying analogy for young people where, you learn to fly a Cessna before you fly a 747, and if you get thrown into the big plane and you only know how to press autopilot and there's anything that goes wrong, you are in trouble. And kind of the same thing in creative work. You need to kind of be proficient with the pen and paper of your craft. You don't have to be the best at it. You just have to understand the theory and try a little bit. And so I love the car analogy too. I might start to use that as well.
Oh, I love it. And look, the value that when we all wrote terrible university essays and they were all wrong, like, the value wasn't the output, but the experience of going through writing the essay because of what we learned. The one thing you realize is AI cannot think for you and it cannot learn for you. You can learn from it and it can help you think, but it can't replace your thinking if you're the decision maker.
That's right. So let's go into decision maker. You've said that you don't feel like a natural CEO before. You seem like you're great at it, but you now have offices in London, Paris, Madrid, Brussels. And so I think you've done a great job. And maybe could you give some words to not just CEOs, but maybe even just managers of all types that might feel a little bit reluctant or imposter syndrome with it? They're doing it, but they have that voice in the back of their head that says, can I do this?
Right. Everyone has that voice. And I think there is a bit of you'd call it a head fake, but we tend to make the mistake of comparing our internal with someone else's external, right? And so those self-doubts, we don't know if other people have that because we only see their output, their actions. And so it's very easy for us to question ourselves and be highly self-critical when we're comparing our struggles and our journey to all we can see of someone else, the output, which is why autobiographies can be really good, because you see the struggle someone went through. The CEO who passed away, the founder of Hyundai, oh man, the struggles that he went through to get where he got to, you just wouldn't see it as the end goal, right? So I think the imposter syndrome is entirely normal, but with things like, okay, how do I look at fear? Fear is basically an inch deep and a mile wide. What I mean by that is everything is big and scary until you do it. Be someone of like action that just does it, because you'll figure it out as you go along. And, you know, some confidence is good because you'll have faith in your ability to rescue yourself, but you're either going to like move at the pace that you set yourself, but sometimes to get further faster, you need to be pulled at an uncomfortable pace set by some externality. Like, you know, I've decided I've signed up for a marathon. Now I have to get fit enough to be able to run for a marathon. And that analogy works in work as well. You take the presentation, you take the thing that's a bit too big for you, and then you know what? You'll probably be fine. You might not do brilliantly, but you'll never be as good or as bad as you thought you were. But that's what progress looks like. So it's probably, if you're having questions with yourself around confidence, I think confident people don't spend much time thinking about how confident they are or are not. They just do the thing, right? And it's that action that comes first. You just do the thing. And then you build up the track record, and you don't even need to think about the confidence to do it because you're just doing it. So it's almost like you progress sometimes help to switch off the pieces of your mind that linger in doubt because they don't serve you. But everyone else has those doubts. You're just comparing your internal, which is what you know of yourself, with someone else's external, which is you just see their output. But they probably had doubts too.
I love that answer. And then Lee, I have to ask you another question we've been talking about with a lot of guests on the show, and I know this is a hard one. We just talked about like what leaders and managers should do. What do you say to young people entering the ads and marketing industry, or maybe even any creative industry at this point in time when, you know, companies are doing layoffs because of AI, when, you know, it just seems like all of this simple work is getting abstracted away by technology. How do young people get a foothold in our sector?
I don't know if I'm necessarily the best person to answer that question because I didn't come from this sector. My background was as a scientist, then a dancer, then I worked in finance, and I found myself in advertising quite by accident. So I don't think I'm necessarily best placed to advise people who are going into the industry to go into the industry. I'm a big fan of the idea of squiggly careers, because what you take from one field or genre, you might be able to take into a different industry, and your thinking different and different life experience is valuable somewhere else. And I think also, like, you know, we talk a fair amount about reverse mentorship, AI natives, social media natives, younger people, because technology has changed so quickly and so fast, have probably got some real things that they can add in a reverse mentoring ability. So I would probably say, make yourself worth mentoring, work really hard, turn up on time, and be really nice to work with. Seek to add value consistently. One of the things that, you know, every CEO probably gets a, hey, can I have a coffee with you? I'll buy you a coffee. Can I have an hour of your time? It's a nice idea, and everyone wants to be able to help, but time is kind of limited. And if you set it up that way, it's a very give-receive relationship where the person who's having the $4 coffee bought for them knows it's working one way, but younger people have got more to offer. So with some self-worth and opinion, and what you have is time, you can say, hey, I've researched this thing. Hey, I've thought about this thing. I think this could be really interesting for you, whether it's right or wrong, but positioning yourself as an active, useful, engaged sparring partner and idea makes that coffee more equitable. And so be someone worth mentoring, I think, is part of it. And then put your hand up. A closed mouth doesn't get fed. And so ask for more responsibility, ask to take on more, and you'll probably find a bunch of stressed CEOs and managers where the world is moving so fast around them, they want the help. They want your brain and your ideas. And so, you know, I think there's still everything to play for. We're in a, frankly, and I think this is kind of sad, you see it certainly in the UK, we're in a less open, less friendly world because we spend more time with technology. If you're used to putting your phone down and interacting with people, like striking up a natural conversation and then a friendship and then being able to work together and develop those skills becomes kind of easy. But in a world which is default closed down, where our attention is being taken into social media, we're not necessarily developing so easily the soft skills that can also help you get ahead.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's a thing that I always tell young people is to, don't just be online all day, despite the fact that there's billions of dollars to be made online in a huge economy. Still go out and connect with people socially. Those human connections matter more. And I remember in the 2000s, we used the internet with the intent of meeting people offline, whether it was connect with other people into the same music or the same art or whatever it was, or a community that was interested in sourdough bread, whatever. We used it to connect in person. And I feel like a lot of the social platforms, because they've optimized for algorithms, are trying to show you the most interesting thing happening in the entire world right now. And there's always something interesting, as opposed to these niche communities. There's still some if you seek them out.
I completely agree with you, because it doesn't matter. The attention economy can't make more hours in a day, and so for shareholder returns, social media companies kind of want to keep you on the platform. It makes sense because you're more valuable the more time you spend on it. But we call it, the fact that we call it doom scrolling is super interesting to me, because this is the most interesting content humanity has ever produced. And if you bother to watch every TikTok video for 10 seconds and people swipe far faster than that, in a 90-minute sitting, you'd see 500 videos. Now, from a brand point of view, that's a difficult space if that's the only place that you're standing out. Or trying to get customers in that online sphere. But from a pure consumer point of view, you have to realize that you are the product, and it's not necessarily serving you. One of the things I do talk about, I lament the loss of waking rest. So our society, because we spend so much time, I call there's different types of boredom. I define them as active boredom and passive boredom. Passive boredom is the receipt, the doom scroll, you're just on your phone, you're swiping, it's not highly engaged. And then there is what we used to have, and I had it so much more as a kid, is active boredom, when you haven't got anything to do and you're bored, but that's when your mind starts coming up with ideas to entertain itself. And that's when play and humor and all of those things can start to happen. And that's your mind engaging itself, not being delivered the dopamine hit as a scroll. But that waking rest, I think, is kind of important, is very important for creativity. So I think, doom scrolling is not creative. You might see some cool stuff. Maybe that's useful. But if you're in a low brainwave state and you're not very engaged with it, I'm not sure how helpful that's going to be for you.
Yeah. Pretty much every creative director I have on the show talks about whenever they get stuck, all they do is they go away from their screen. They take a walk, they go play with their dog. They do something, they go to a concert, they do something away from screens. And when they leave their screen, inevitably great ideas come to them. So it's like we all work at our computers and we're expected to come up with great ideas, but really you have to get away from your computer if you ever want to come up with anything meaningful. You need that time, as you said, to be bored, to let your thoughts, wander.
It's percolating, right? Our view as inspiration partner is we help people. In order to connect the dots, first you have to collect a few more dots. And so when people come in, I feel like our role is to overstimulate, overwhelm people almost, so they leave fizzing, brimming with ideas, and then over time that will percolate. And it's that waking rest that is the time and the space for you to come up with ideas. Everyone's had the colleague, and hopefully done it themselves, where they've gone away for a bit of a retreat, their technology's been off, they come back reinvigorated, they come back having new ideas, because it takes time for your subconscious to process the ideas in the background for them to bubble up, right? And we're human, we're biology, right? We make our buying decisions aren't entirely rational, they are emotional. Our brains are doing these things in the background. We've then just got our conscious thought on top that justifies it. But a lot of our decision making, and I suspect a lot of our ability to come up with ideas, almost happens in the background of your subconscious and then bubbles up. But you need to have the time and the space to do it, to your point, Adam.
100%. Lee, you're a really interesting guy. I have such FOMO. I need to visit your studio. Tell our listeners about your company and how to connect with you, and if what you do for them.
Yeah, great, fantastic. I mean, look, Global Street Art is a phenomenal company. We are a media owner. We deliver obviously super high quality, large format, out of home advertising that's very high impact. I feel that actually our product from our client's point of view is reassurance when we're taking them through that process. And the product is almost like their whole experience of working with us end to end. What we deliver, or what our walls deliver for clients, are certainly like, there's the impacts, the number of people that see it, but then there's the emotional response. If you take the same artwork and you put it on a digital screen versus paint it on a wall, just the act of painting makes people stop, stare, share it, right? It gives them a higher emotional response because it's a form of costly signaling. It's a difficult communication. It just looks amazing. And fundamentally, it's really cool that someone painted it. So people stop, people share it, and then they remember it. And memory priming, all of that kind of good stuff is part of when someone is finally in market. That's the brand that recalls more. But what we've got as a form of out of home is it's so shareable because people do stop and take photographs. And that's really rare for another form of large out of home. Not many people, let's be honest, photograph banners. Not many people, let's be honest, like stop and photograph digital screens. Of course, some people do. There is some shareability, but the shareability is so much greater when you've got people abseiling on a wall, 20 meters off the ground in a lift, painting something phenomenal and beautiful. And so what we deliver for clients are great impressions, but also the ability to create that earned media, that reach on top as well. So we like to hold our product against other forms of out of home, but really it also extends into the social sphere. So that's the narrow of what we do as a company. What it's like to work with us, it's that inspiration partner concept that I mentioned before. We want to be adding value in different and creative ways, even before people are thinking about doing painting a mural. To the teams that we're working with. We're easy to find online, at globalstreetart.com, at Global Street on Instagram, but we're on LinkedIn as well. But we're just pretty easy to get hold of. Like, you can follow me or our company page. We're obviously all on LinkedIn. Everyone, is. I also post from our gallery the inspo stuff and things about our collections. That's on TikTok and Instagram at Lee Bofkin Inspo. But Global Street Art is the company. We're super easy to find. And love people getting in touch.
Awesome. Well, we'll put links to Lee in the show notes. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in this week. We'll see you for another episode next time.
Thank you.